The story actually begins when I discovered a website called Keen. And Keen had a social side to what is now a psychic site. And I had a listing on there and talked to a lot of guys, and it wasn't phone sex. I mean, guys wanted it to be, but it wasn't phone sex, and adult conversation was not allowed. And there were several guys who called me. We enjoyed the calls. Several told me how hypnotic I sounded, and it was fun. One day I decided to go take a hypnosis course over the weekend, and I was doing it more for myself. However, I remembered thinking at the time it would have interesting personal implications. And I say personal because I wasn't looking past what I could personally do with someone that I was intimate with. And it was nothing fetishy, it was nothing extreme, it was just about pleasure. I'm a sensual person, and it was just about how it could enhance the sensuality of whatever might be going on. So, two things were happening at once. I was taking the Keen calls, and I had taken the hypnosis class. Around sometime after I had been doing the calls, Keen started to have a different section, which was more adult in nature, which is now what has become Night Flirt. And what I noticed was that there were people who were doing hypnosis in a sexual context. They were women doing things that weren't quite what I wanted to do and weren't quite who I was. Not even quite. It really just wasn't who I was. But when you're doing something in an adult context, it's kind of hard to know where to do it because there are very few options that we have in our current state to be able to have conversations that are adult in nature and get paid for it. Which a lot of people, too, by the way, wonder about the whole payment thing, but that's probably another conversation for another day. So I looked at the categories, I looked at the listings, I looked at what the women were doing, and I have to admit I was kind of intimidated because they seemed to know what they were doing, and I had no clue. Interestingly enough, if you know anything about business, they tell you go get a mentor, get somebody who can tell you what to do or how to do it. And I knew somehow that that wasn't going to work here. Don't ask me how I knew, but I guess you probably could figure out how I knew that. And I never asked anybody how to do what I was going to do, which is probably just as well because it made me figure out who I was and helped. I had to figure out how to carve out a little niche for myself, a little corner. So what I did was I looked at the available listings and the categories, and I decided, well, I wasn't submissive, and that was one category, so that wasn't going to happen. And I wasn't really dominant either, but I figured at least in a quote-unquote dominant section or a dominant role, I could say how things would go. What I didn't realize, although I kind of suspected based on the situation I had had prior to this, where somebody had called asking for hypnosis, and I told them, I said, I'm not really into it, but I'd taken a hypnosis course, I could see what I could do, and basically, when he called, I took a script from my class, and I just inserted a little bit of eroticism, I mean, the tiniest bit. And I think he even hung up on me. I can't remember. But he wrote a scathing review. And what I didn't realize was that there were a lot of guys out there who probably knew more at that point about erotic hypnosis than I did, which I think probably is not too uncommon because a lot of guys who seem to have this as a fetish, it goes way back and they seem to have a lot of experience with hypnotists and hypnosis. So I decided to put up the listing in I forget what section it was, but in something with about dominant women, and started to take calls. I told I told some of the guys I had been talking to on Keen that I was going to do this, and I offered them a ridiculously low rate for them to call me for an hour. I sat down, I wrote a script, and I did my thing. They really seemed to be enjoying it, and so did I. So, the first one, I still remember who he was, and it went really well, and I read my script. Second time, I didn't read the whole script. I started to wing it. And the third one, I was winging it already. So it seems as though once I got into it and people were willing to let me do things the way that it seemed to work for me, it seemed to really work. Over the time that I've been doing it, I've had people request things that have been more into the fetish and of hypnosis as a DS type of tool, some of which I'm okay with in terms of control aspects and things like that. But there are some things, like guys who want to be turned into women and guys who want to be humiliated and things like that, that I'm unwilling to participate in. I always tell people that I'll never judge them for what they want, but I'll judge my participation in whatever it is. So when I say no to something, it's only because I don't feel comfortable with it. And the thing is I probably would suck at it too because I don't feel comfortable with it. I wouldn't know the first thing about humiliating someone, even though I think there are some things sometimes that might be in that range for some people. But it's something that is a dynamic that seems to work for me in that context. So whenever I talk to people, it's a dynamic that I have with them, and it works or it doesn't. I have often referred people to other hypnotists, not by name, but just just saying I'm not the right person for you, and would do that in a heartbeat if I didn't feel like I was. People have actually thanked me for my honesty. I think it's only the right thing to do for me, for them. At the end of the day, I have to live with myself, and I'm very cautious what I do for that exact reason. I do care about those I speak with. I care about those I hypnotize. And I want people to have only the best experiences they can with this. And sometimes the fetish can carry one away, or the fetish has a desire to carry one away. And oftentimes, if that's the case, those who experience it in a way that isn't helpful or healthy for them, they will find that the fantasy and the reality do not align. And sadly, it's not that it's better than the fantasy, it's that it's worse. So, having said that, now you know how I got started. If you want to ask me any other questions, feel free to do so. You can find out more information about me at IsisTheEnchantress.com. You can also see my blog, and there's a link at IsisTheEnchantress.com for my blog. There are pictures, there are videos, there are all kinds of things about hypnosis, about life, about relationships. I talk about a lot of different things because I know that there are many parts and pieces to you, and I like to pay attention to them all. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I hope I'll speak to you soon.